Hi guys, Sean here from digiDirect. Today we're shooting indoors due to rain, unfortunately, but we're going to be discussing the brand new Canon EOS RP. Now this has just been announced, it's due out February 27th, and this is the second in Canon's lineup of full-frame mirrorless cameras, of course following the EOS R, which was launched in September of 2018. Now I've had a play with the camera, we're going to share some photos of my impressions, but the gist of the RP really is that it's an entry-level version of the EOS R. So the specs are kind of lower across the board, but it does come in being smaller, lighter, and less expensive than the R. Now without any further ado, let's jump in and take a look at the RP. Now the body design on the RP is similar to the R, but it is a smaller camera again. In fact, the RP is Canon's most compact full-frame camera now, which is definitely one of its main strengths, that size factor. Officially, it's actually only 10% smaller than the R, but it is 25% lighter. That's something that I can't convey on video, of course, but I definitely noticed that when picking it up and shooting with it. Compared to a 6D Mark II, the size difference here is even more significant. And although the size is small, I found the grip still to be quite deep and comfortable and easy to use. Layout-wise, it's similar to the R. Note it does not have a top LCD screen, but we have a good assortment of dials and buttons that I found to be pretty ergonomic, including 3 custom spots on the mode dial that you can customize. It has a fully articulating LCD touchscreen, which also features touch focus and touch and drag auto focus, so if you're looking through the viewfinder, you can put your thumb on the screen and move the AF point around. The viewfinder is 2.36 million dots. That is a bit lower resolution than the 3.69 million dots on the R, but I still found it to be quite sharp and clear. It does have both mic and headphone jacks, which is great for video, and it has a single UHS 2 compatible SD card slot. Now a lot of people disliked on the EOS R how it didn't have dual card slots. Of course that's the same in the RP here, but it's a lot more acceptable on a more entry-level camera compared to the R. The RP uses Canon's LPE17 battery, not the larger LPE6, which does mean the battery life is a fair amount shorter on the RP here. It's rated for 200 shots, whereas the EOS R is rated for 350. To help slightly with that, it does have a USB-C port that you can use to charge via USB, for example, if you've got a mobile power pack or similar. The camera has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Canon's also going to be releasing these extension grips in a couple different colors. They're not battery grips. All they really do is just make the grip a little bit chunkier, if that's your thing. Note, also announced today was a roadmap of 6 more native RF mount lenses that would work on the EOS R and RP. These are going to be released throughout 2019. I didn't get a chance to play with these today, but they have announced a trifecta, so a 15 to 35, 24 to 70, and 70 to 200 mm L series lens, all of which are f2.8, and they all have IS. They've also announced 2 versions of an 85 mm f1.2L and a 24 to 240 IS non-L series lens. That last one I think would be a good fit as a kit lens for the EOS RP. And of course you can still use the EF to EOS R adapter on the RP, allowing you to put Canon EF mount lenses onto the R or the RP. So the EOS RP has a 26 megapixel full frame sensor inside of it. This is a little bit lower resolution than the 30 megapixel sensor on the EOS R, although not by much. Now the first thing I want to comment here is the picture quality coming out of this camera. These photos are extremely high quality. I was really impressed. The sharpness is very high. I was shooting this on a mix of the RF 50mm lens and the RF 24 to 105mm lens. And yeah, the quality here is really outstanding. In fact, as I was reviewing these photos on my computer, a number of my colleagues were coming up and commenting on how high quality they looked. So while the EOS RP is a lower spec camera than the R, it's definitely good to see that you can definitely output some really high quality imagery on this camera. So that's a big benefit. Let's talk about the autofocus system on the RP. It has Canon's tried and true and fantastic dual pixel autofocus system inside of it. It has 4,779 AF points, which cover about 88% of the frame. A little bit fewer points than on the EOS R, which has 5,655, but that's still a lot of points, and the response time of the AF is still very high, being at 0.05 seconds. That's not absolutely market leading. The recently released Sony a6400 has 0.02 seconds, but it's still among the top performers in the market, so it's still a very robust AF system on this camera. Now, we didn't get a ton of movement-based shots to really test that out, But the little I was able to do here did bear out that the AF system was quite responsive. I had it on facial tracking here, so it does seem to be a very robust AF system in here as well. The RP also has eye detect autofocus, which was also on the R, but in the RP now, this actually works in servo, so continuous autofocus, as well as for movie servo as well. The RP can autofocus at up to -5 EV, so for low light focusing, whereas the R can be focused at -6 EV. And burst shooting on the RP is capped at 4 frames per second with AF tracking. On the R, it's 5 frames per second with AF tracking. Now, neither of those numbers are very high, so like the R, the RP is not going to be a particularly sports-focused camera, although the buffer size, if you're shooting JPEGs on the RP, is actually indefinite, so you can keep shooting until the card fills up. If you're shooting RAWs, it's a 50-shot buffer. Let's take a look at video. The RP can shoot 4K at up to 25 frames per second and 1080 up to 60 frames per second. In comparison, the R can do 4K 30 and up to 1080 at 120 frames per second, so there is some decreases there. It does still have Canon's big 4K crop. It's got that 1.7 times crop when shooting in 4K. Unfortunately, that is still present. It does not have the Canon log picture profile that the EOS R has. Having a mic and headphone jack on the RP is quite useful, as well as the fully articulating screen is helpful. It also does gain 4K time-lapse functionality, which the EOS R does not have actually. But really the biggest letdown for video shooting on the RP is that the dual pixel autofocus system does not work in 4K. When you're shooting in 4K, it switches over to a contrast detection system, which is just straight up inferior to the dual pixel system. So here I'm shooting in 1080 using the dual pixel, and it's fantastic. This is one of the best video AF tracking systems on the market. It does a great job at tracking the subject's face and so on. But when you hop over to 4K, it can give you some issues sometimes in acquiring focus. Even when you do acquire focus, sometimes it still hunts a little bit. It's not horrible, but compared to how fantastic the dual pixel AF system is, it's really a shame that that didn't make its way into 4K. Now the last thing that I'll touch on here is the price point of the RP. Now in Australia here, it's selling for $2,000, which is $1,000 less than the EOS R, $900 less than the Nikon Z6, and even $700 less than the Sony a7 III. Now, I know the RP is the lowest spec of all of those cameras mentioned, but I still think that's a pretty aggressive price point and represents a pretty good value proposition. You know, the RP is a very compact and lightweight full-frame camera with a fully articulating LCD screen, which the Sony a7 III doesn't have, for example. The picture quality is stellar, super high. The autofocus system is quite fast and responsive. While I do have some issues with video shooting, notably not having dual pixel AF in 4K, still having that 4K crop, the video quality still is quite high, and having that mic and headphone jack as well as 4K time-lapse functionality also helps a bit there as well. Overall, I think that the RP is a very strong second entry in Canon's full-frame mirrorless lineup. I think it may even prove more popular than the EOS R in the long run. And especially considering those new lenses that Canon has announced at the same time throughout 2019, there's some pretty strong lenses in there, you know, 70-200, 24-70, 2.8s, and so on. I think that just makes this whole system a lot more attractive. Now the RP will be out February 27th. You can pre-order it on our website now at www.digidirect.com.au. And if you're watching this video after the camera has come out, feel free to visit us in store, which case you can test the camera out for yourself, see that size and weight factor, and see how that stacks up for you. We've got stores in the Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Miranda, the Brisbane and Melbourne CBD, and Cannington, Western Australia, which is just outside the Perth CBD. Thanks, guys. Take care.